So the Gemara tells us in Sukkah that in a couple of ways, Gumilas Chasadim, acts of loving kindness, is greater than the mitzvah of tzedakah. In what three ways the Gemara tells us? The Gemara tells us, number one is that tzedakah can only be given to the poor. Charity can only be given to the poor. But chesed can be done to the rich and the poor. There's no limitations. In fact, many wealthy people are lonely and need the chesed. Secondly, another distinction between chesed and tzedakah. Tzedakah can only be given with money, but chesed can be done as well with bodily exertion. You don't necessarily have to give someone money. You can help them across the street, help them move, help them on the wheelchair, whatever the case may be. And thirdly, the Gemara says, tzedakah can only be given to the living, but chesed can be done to the living and the dead. As we all know, the ultimate chesed is normally at the end of Parashas Vayechi, chesed shel emes. The ultimate chesed is burying the dead, because we know when we do someone a favor, so whether we're thinking it or not subconsciously, in the back of our mind we're thinking, you owe me one. So, however, and then that's why there's a saying, it says, you do someone a favor, he says thank you, say don't mention it. Don't think we're even because you said a thank you, you still owe me the favor. But either way, so chesed is, and that's why, as Rashi writes, Eino Masapeh L'Tashlum Gul. When you do a mitzvah of helping someone in the burial, you're in no rush for payback. When you do other chesed, getting someone tickets, you want tickets back, but when you're burying someone, you can wait. So those in three ways, so we see in terms of scope, Gumilas Chasadim is definitely much broader than tzedakah. And also, let me just point out, tzedakah, the English word is usually charity, which is really not a good definition of tzedakah, because charity implies it's something extra. I'll make a charitable, I'll go to a charitable fair, I'll do something extra, like I'll volunteering. Tzedakah from the word tzedek means din, you're obligated. How much you have to give, we can get into the details, but tzedakah isn't something optional, it's something mandatory for every Jew. But it's just not as broad as chesed. So the Maral points out, not only is there a quantitative difference between tzedakah and chesed, but there's a qualitative difference. The qualitative difference being is, when does a person usually give tzedakah? You don't have to do anything. Someone could be knocking on your door, someone now could be sending you emails, they could be calling you on the phone, you're walking on the street, a beggar comes to you and wants some money. So basically it comes usually from an external source. In other words, I'm not necessarily thinking about giving tzedakah at the moment, but either some circumstance happens, I get called, someone stops me and they need help, so you're a good person, you're happy to help them out.
So can you differentiate whether this only applies in Eretz Yisrael, where the propensity for the people to be Jewish is higher than if you're L'chol?
I didn't mention anything about Jew and non-Jew yet, so...
But doesn't it apply specifically? Din is specifically for Jew.
What specifically for Jew?
Din, mishpat, of tzedakah applies only...
We'll see. You're making assumptions which may or may not be true, but we'll get to it. But before, we have to establish the principle first, then we'll get into the details. So the Maharal explains that by tzedakah comes from an external force. Outside, somebody asks you for tzedakah in your house, but chesed comes from within. I have desire, I have to do a good deed. Okay, whether I do it on you or you, it doesn't make a difference to me. How does the Maharal know this? This week's parsha. Vayera Elav Hashem be'eloni Mamre. God appeared to Abraham in the plains of Mamre. So usually it's very strange here. Usually God comes to a prophet and then he tells him what he came for. Like, okay, he comes down, now this is what I want you to do. Vayera Hashem, he comes down, next thing you know, Avram's taking off and running after these three strangers. So what's going on? So that's what the Mefarshim point out, that where do we see that chesed comes from within? Because who is this for? Did Hashem create the scenario for Abraham, or did he do it for the people? We have a tradition, they were angels. angels don't eat. So this made believe. So God set up the whole scenario just so Avram could go ahead and do an act of chesed. So we see, besides the quantitative difference in terms of how much broader it is, there's a much more fundamental difference between chesed and tzedakah. That tzedakah comes from an external source, but chesed is for you. In fact, at another angle, as well as the difference between tzedakah and chesed is that the halacha is, let's say you're walking down the street, you drop a $20 bill, and you don't even know you dropped it. And an ani, a poor person, picks it up. Do you get the mitzvah of tzedakah? So the Chazal tell us yes. So we see another fundamental difference between chesed and tzedakah is result oriented. In other words, there's one aspect of tzedakah that, the words are interchangeable. We'll just use chesed and tzedakah. The different svarim will use different names, but it'll be the same distinction. That there's two aspects to, you could call it two aspects to tzedakah, two aspects of chesed. What is called chesed versus tzedakah. That tzedakah is result oriented. Your job is to help the poor person get food. How he got the food, what's the difference? If you knew about it, you didn't think about it, it doesn't make a difference. However, that act, that didn't make you into a better person. I mean, you didn't even know you did it. How could it possibly? So in terms of the mitzvah you got, because you helped someone else. But chesed, the focus is on you. That you, by every time, there's two sources. It's v'ahavta l'orecha kamocha. You love your neighbor like you. That's the result-oriented one. You have to make sure you help the person across the street. This poor person has food on the table. But then there's a second aspect of chesed, which is the Gemara is talking about that we have to follow in the ways of God. What does that mean, follow in the ways of God? So we know Avram walked in front of God. Noah held God's hands. And in fact, the Rabbi Selevan used to say, he gave a parable when he used to have his grandkids. So, depending what age they were when they used to walk to shul, some grandkids run ahead of you, some you have to hold by the hand, and some are schlepping behind. He says, our job, we don't have to be like Noah. Our job is to walk behind HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What does that mean, walk behind? We learn from his midos. That this like God is a Rachel V'chanan. God does acts of loving kindness. We have to. He visits the sick. He goes to the house. He does all these things. So that's how we become godly. So the more we partake in these acts. In fact, that's why the Gemara tells us a tremendous lesson, a tremendous chiddush. The Gemara says that what do we see in the middle of Abraham talking to God? He takes off and he takes care of these guests. So the Gemara tells us, we learn, the Gemara in Shabbos tells us a principle, Gedola hachnasas archem mikabolas pnei hashchina. Greater is the mitzvah of entertaining guests than it is speaking to God. How we know it? We learn that from Avram. Avram is in the middle of speaking to God. He takes off and takes care of these three people in the desert. So the question is, where did Avram know it? We learn it from Avram. It seems a little chutzpah in the middle of talking to God. So Reb Nissen Alpert explained, one of my rebbeim at YU, a Talmud Mufak of Rav Moshe Feinstein on the Lower East Side. He points out that God told him. How did God, maybe God did tell him, but we don't see that. Where do you see God telling him? I missed that in the pasuk. Where does it say that? So he explains as follows. The Rambam tells us the different levels of prophecy. And basically Moshe Rabbeinu is on a different plane. He's on his own level of prophecy. And then everyone else is on a certain... The Moshe Rabbeinu was face to face. That's why the Torah is on a different level, dictated, as the Gemara says, Shechina medaberes b'tol grono shel Moshe. Basically, Moshe became an extension of God. He opened his mouth and he said it. By other Nevi'im, it didn't work that way. They were in a sleep. They were in a dream. In fact, that's the Rambam. Maimonides learns this whole episode. It never happened. It was only in Avram's mind. This whole incident is a dream. But we don't, most don't assume like the Rambam. We assume it actually did happen. But it is the...
Where does Rambam say that this whole episode with the three guys in the desert, that was all in a dream? Where does he say that?
He has, I'll get you the exact source, I'm saying, but he has to, that's where but in general, he's a rationalist, so he doesn't go, a lot of times, like in the Gemara, he doesn't go for shadim, for demons, and to the Rambam. But we, most Mepharshim assume it actually did happen, but parenthetically, the Rambam writes it never happened. It was just it was a dream that Avram was having. But either way, so they point out that so Avram was any time that someone spoke to God, they were in a deep, spaced out dream. It was pitch black. So Avram's talking to God hundreds of times, and he never sees anything. All of a sudden, in the middle of speaking to God, he sees a picture of 3 people walking towards him. So he's saying, "What's going on here? I never see anything. It must be God teaching me a lesson here. If he's showing me the people, that means he's not just showing me them for fun." And after he went out, in fact, that's the lesson in the Psukim. We learn how we follow Avram Avinu, learn how to become a mensch. It says Vayar, he saw them, and then it says Vayar twice in the pasuk. I don't have the pasuk in front of me. Doing it, he saw them. Like, why say it twice? So one is Vayar. Let's say what happens to all of us. Let's say whether it's Friday night after Shua Vayar, you see someone, not the undesirables that Jonathan's going to have over for Shabbos. So those people who, like, you see someone who probably needs a place to, you see the person, he probably needs a place to be not, but it's Vayar, the second Vayar is everyone sees the person, but it's the second Vayar, you internalize it. I'm going to go over and invite him and see if he has a place. I don't have to have the knowledge of it. By the way, 6 people didn't have dinner last night. It doesn't really do much good, besides some good Lashon Hara. But in terms of Vayar, you internalize the message. You didn't just look. In fact, that's what they say, the pshat in the pasuk at the end of benching. The Nara Isi Gamza, very controversial pasuk. I think some say, some Chabad don't say it. Nara Isi Gamza Kanti. It's been my whole life, Belora Isi Sadik Nezav. I never saw a Sadik forsaken. So everyone asks, what do you mean? You have to get out a little bit more. So, there are many different pshat. But the pshat I liked the best was, and they learned that by Moshe Rabbeinu when he went out Vayar and he saw the Sivlos Mitzrayim. Vayar doesn't just mean seeing. Vayar means you see it, you internalize and you act on it. David's saying, I never sat by, of course he saw Tzadikim Nezav, but now over Isi Sadik Nezav, I never sat there and watched, but I actually went out and did something about it. But that's what Vayar, that's what we learn from Avram Avinu, follow Avram Avinu for a day and learn how to become a mensch. So that's why we learn out from Avram all these different lessons of chesed. Because it says, so it's very interesting, you follow Avram around, and what does he do? He's very generous. He gets you the big pieces of ribs. I think they say it was skirt steak, beef tenderloin, Miami ribs, steak, then the different types of potatoes, some fries, the good coleslaw. Well, he's not a vegetarian anyway, just usually, but fundamentally that's his wife. So he points out that so it seems very strange. Speaking of drinks, he did not serve them diet. Maybe he was that concerned that they eat too much, but he served. It says, so what does the pasuk say? Yukach na ma'at mayim. The pasuk says he only gave them a little bit of water. Why was Avram so stingy with the water? Mike, why are you so stingy with the water? He's learning from the parsha. So why is Avram so stingy with the water? If everything else, you could have triples of steaks, the prime rib, and then all of a sudden with the water. So what's the pshat here? Yukach na ma'at mayim. So the 2 pshat, one's from the Chafetz Chaim, and one's from Rav Nissen Alpert again. So Rav Chafetz Chaim says there are 2 halachas when you have a guest over. There's the halacha of kabdehu, to honor them, v'chashdehu, and you also have to beware. You can't be naive. You can't just take someone off the street, leave them in your house, and then you come back, everything's gone. You can't be naive. You have to, but the focus has to be on kabdehu, but you can't be told. You have to make sure you don't leave them alone and set them up for that. So that's what the Chafetz Chaim writes, that in terms of honoring, Avram went all out. He got them the potatoes, the meat, etc. But why was he giving them water? So Rashi writes, because during those days they used to worship the earth on the ground. So he gave them water to wash off. He didn't want them to bring Avodah Zarah into his tent. So it came to them being idol worshippers, okay, you got them out mayim, just in case, a little bit. When it came to the mitzvah of kabdehu, some people, before they have someone over, they need an FBI, they need a credit check, they need a criminal check to see what the person's history is. And to the too much on the chashteo, not enough on the kabdeo. So that's what we see from Avram. Of course, you can't be naive. You can't just let anyone in your house, especially today. But the focus should be on the ikar shus, the honor, not the chashteo. And Rabbi Selevan says a different shot. He says Avram's teaching us a tremendous lesson in chesed. He's teaching us, you know what? Why did he only bring a little bit of water? Because Rashi quotes the Chazal. He did it al yidei shliach. He did it through a messenger. In fact, that's why Chazal tell us, because he didn't do the water directly. The bread that he brought, he did himself. The man fell from heaven directly. But the water, they had to go through the well because, mitzvah goreres mitzvah. So he sent someone else to do it. So Avram is teaching us a tremendous lesson. I'm sure if Avram himself, again, we have to go back. It wasn't like getting water in the sink here. The well, you had to go to the wells. They could have been miles away, and then someone had to schlep all the water back and forth. So I'm sure if Avram and Sarah were getting the water themselves, they would have got the full amount of water. But if you're telling someone else to do something for you, don't be a tzaddik at someone else's expense. When do people become tzaddikim? When they're not doing it, why don't you get up at 3 in the morning, go pick this person up from the airport? Why don't you go help out in the shul? Why don't you do that? When they're offering advice to someone else, they're very big on the sidkis. But if they have to do it, they're looking for the bare minimum. It's just the opposite. The lesson of chesed, if you're doing it yourself, you go all out. But if you're asking someone else to do something for you, then you do the minimum, whatever you need. But don't ask them to do more than they have to. And in fact, that's what we see Avram also last week's parsha, that when that after the war they wanted to give him all the booty, all the leftover. He said, "No, I don't want it. I don't want people saying someone else made Avram rich." But he said, "But the soldiers who fought, they're entitled, so they could take whatever they want." So again, Avram wasn't a tzaddik when it came to his own. If you want to be machmir, if you want to be strict at your own expense, not on your family's and not someone else's. So that's what we see. So that's what we see from Avram Avinu, and that's what he points out. Yulach namiyat mayim, because he didn't do it, but if he did it himself, so then we'd see that he would. So that's what we see. The chesed follow Avram Avinu around for the day, and you learn how to become a mensch. That's the tzedakah is the result part, but the chesed is it transforms a person. You become a better person. Every time you do an act of chesed, you become better. In fact, that's what the Rambam writes. Even though he says, if you have a choice, let's say you have $1,000 you're giving to tzedakah, and let's say assume you're giving it to this person. So should you give him the $1,000 check right away, or should you give him 10 checks of 100? So the Rambam writes, give him 10 checks of 100. Where don't give it all one time, better to give smaller amounts more often. Well, why? It's the same $1,000. Who cares? Like we're playing some games here. No, so it depends. So in terms of the person getting it, the Rambam's not talking about that. Maybe the person getting it, maybe it's better if he does get the 1,000 right away. But at the end of the day, he has the same money.
Each act.
The Rambam writes that you have to train yourself to become a giver. Every time you do an act of giving, you become closer to God. We're emulating HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we get closer to God. Our personality changes.
What if you set up an auto pay?
Yeah.
I'm curious. What if you do that? Does that circumvent your?
Yeah, it's not one act, but it's one act to set it up. Even if it's monthly to charity.
Yeah, but you can write all 10 checks.
Right. Well, you also know that you can see it come out.
Again?
So checks it's posted, but it's the fact you see it coming out of your bank account. It shows up on your bank.
Because I'm saying the point being it's also a lot of times you're giving tzedakah not just to the poor person, you're giving it to the organization who's giving it to the poor. If we're just saying obviously I hear it's a general issue where you're saying like that's a general problem today with modern technology that we lose the personal aspect.
Okay,
so,
let me give you a simple example. Say I give you $1,000, I give it to Joe, and I say, Joe, you're going to Israel, and I want you to give this $1,000 and $100 checks to as many people as you see need it. How many times did I give? Right? If I say, Joe, here's 1,000, you're going to Israel, give it to 10 Anaya.
No, he's right.
He's my shaliach.
Yes, that's okay.
So I say I get 10.
Yeah, I'm saying that's okay.
But I only gave once. You see, you're trying to train yourself to give, but I only give once in one chunk.
So obviously in that case, I mean, in that case, it's not. What I'm saying, it's not going to be the same. I mean, the point is, he's going to be gaining. In other words, because what he's going to come back and text you. Ani number one, each time he gives, he's going to be texting you back, and then you'll be feeling that's the point.
You have to be feeling the giving. You have
I agree. No,
feeling
exactly. The Rambam would say it's better for you to give yourself.
Right.
And I'm saying no. So it's still better. And the point, but that's the problem with the society. That with modern technology, it's great, but we see it in many areas of chinuch that we lose the personal aspect. Let's say shalach manas. Ever remembers? You used to make the shalach manas with your parents and go around and you drove around and you gave out shalach manas. Today they have where you have one big, again, some shuls, and it's people don't have the time or don't want to. You give one big shalach manas. You just give them. You tell the shul whose name do you want to be on. So on one hand it's very convenient, but you lose the personal aspect. That's in today's society. It's always the pros and cons of convenience versus the person. You have to have a balance of both, but that's always the danger. So the Rambam would not be happy. You still get the mitzvah of tzedakah, but you'd be losing on you wouldn't have the same aspect of giving if you're not actually. And also today, when you give to the institution, maybe it's not the same either. He's talking about. So again, it depends. It's a relative term. I guess it depends what makes you feel like a giver and stuff. So we see that's the difference. Tzedakah is more result oriented. Chesed is more to transform the person. And so.
But chesed isn't the mitzvah, right? Tzedakah is the mitzvah. Chesed isn't.
No, chesed is a mitzvah also.
Where?
With many sources, but either have to. It depends. Many sources is under. That you have to the Acharei Hashem Yelechu, you have to imitate God, or it's a V'ahavta Recha Kamocha, it's under the rubric. They have different. There's 7. They quote different sources, and it's a general question. Is there a mitzvah Adam Chaver, a general mitzvah, and then Bikor, visiting the sick, comforting. Those are all details within. Not each one doesn't have to have their own source in terms of that, but they quote. There's many different psukim. They go they're both mitzvahs, and that's what Avram's teaching. The mitzvah is avat chesed. It's not just doing it. The point is, not to throw the steak at the person, but you're supposed to, do it in a way where you're not going to get transformed too much if you're angry at the person. You're just doing it because you have to. In fact, that's what we learn. Lech lecha. God told Avram to go ahead, leave your homeland, and go to the land where you're going to go. And what does Rashi write? Lecha. It has to be for your own benefit and good. So what's Rashi telling us? A very important yisod in life. What is God teaching Avram? That you see it as kids, and there's a lot of kids who are adults now that basically I don't really want to do it, but I have to do it, so I'll do it. Well, my parents are making me throw out the garbage. They're making me go to school. They're making me daven. Whatever. Okay, you could fill in the blanks. You never, I'm not saying there's a time in chinuch where you have to force your kids to do something. It depends what age they are to get them accustomed. But there is a certain point, whatever that point is, and depends what mitzvah we're talking about, where ultimately the point is they should be saying, they have to learn to do it on their own. Ultimately, you're not going to be there in front of them to hold their hand. Of course, you'll be around for questions and mentoring and chinuch, but there has to be a time where, like they say, what's a good teacher, that the kids know that even when the teacher's not in the class, they have them trained, they're going to act the same way. And that's anything. That's at home. To the point being is, to the point being is that by Avram, he's saying, if Avram was just, if God said, well, I don't really want to leave my home, but God's telling me I have to go, it never would have worked out. If you do things in life because you have to, as I say, if you're going to be. See, Talmud Torah is an exception to that rule. Talmud Torah, do we have a principle, mitzvah salav lahanos? If someone takes a vow, they say, I'm not going to get any benefit from this person. So let's say it's sukkahs. You're allowed to sit in the sukkah, or let's say you're allowed to shake the lulav and that's what about mitzvah salav lahanos? It's not, mitzvahs there's not that personal benefit. However, Talmud Torah lahanosnin, the Talmud Torah, when it comes to Torah learning, the ikar is, people think, we know there's a mitzvah Amelus Batorah, the Iglei Tal, right in the beginning of the Sefer. People make the biggest mistake when it comes to learning. You know what? I have two parts of Torah. Some parts I find the more boring to me, less interesting, and this I really want to do. They think if I force myself to learn the part I don't want to do, it's a higher level. He says that's very foolish. He says it's the opposite. When it comes to you can't. When you learn Torah, it can't be like shaking glue. And shaking glue, if you're doing it because God said to do it. But when you're learning Torah, and to be matzliach in learning, if you don't enjoy what you're doing, it's never going to last. So that's what, same thing with anything in life, any job or anything you're going to do in life. The trick is you have to realize it's lahanascha trovas. That's the challenge when you have volunteers, wherever they are. Because when a volunteer think, well, don't tell me what to do, I'm doing you the favor. And there is an aspect they are, but ultimately, to be a successful volunteer, if that's going to be your attitude, it's not going to work. You're going to burn out, you're going to resent people. To volunteer, you have to realize you're gaining more from volunteering than you are to the person who's getting it. The Gemara says in the beginning of Shabbos, the person who gives the money to the ani gets more out of it. The poor person who gets a meal or two. But you did an act that's going to affect you eternally, that you've had an effect on your soul and therefore everything you do. So that's the attitude you have to have all the time. It has to be the attitude of lechocha. You have to realize anything you do, ultimately it's for you. That, in a certain sense, it's kind of like it's a good selfish. You know, that ultimately, on a certain level, anytime you do chesed, it's really, you're really benefiting from it. It's like you're getting two, you know, and that's that. But you know, not that the sole purpose should be for you. Obviously, you have to feel the pain of someone else and you're helping them out. But ultimately, it shouldn't be just for the other person. Ultimately, you have to that the goal should be to help the other person. But ultimately, you have to realize that really you yourself are gaining. You know, you're gaining by even more than. Is that a question?
Yeah, but could that also not go to the extreme where you become, in theory, somebody could become so addicted to the positive aspect that they get from it, that it could actually drive them to do it at the expense of other things. For example, providing for their family, right? So in other words, somebody wants to give tzedakah because it's so much that they actually are so involved in that mitzvah that it becomes a negative on their own ability to support their family.
Right, there's limitations. In fact, that's what the limitation is, that you can't give more than 20%. You know, it's a question whether today...
Of your time or money.
Right, but at least, I mean, we'll see, it depends what you do, but at least, again, it depends. If you're a millionaire, billionaire, then the person, don't worry about it. But I'm just saying, but the point being is, the concern, if you give whatever too much is, exactly your point, if you give too much tzedakah, you're going to end up in the poorhouse and you're going to have to go around, so we don't want you to be a burden on the community. So they give you, that's true in any midah. That in fact chesed, in fact it's interesting, where do we find the word chesed used? At the end of, in Acharei Mos, when it's talking about znus, when it's talking about illicit relations, it's talking about incest. It's talking about all the illicit relations, and it says chesed hu. If you commit incest, chesed hu. Oh, it is? It's a tremendous act of loving kindness. You commit incest, what does that mean? So others point, so some point out...
Controlling your...
Yes, the other one says, Olam chesed yibana. It means, no, that the whole world, you know, originally they had a, you know, with gold and the system, and to keep the world going at one point had to do it. But others point out, the Gedolei Achronim say, no, any midah done to the extreme could be perverted, and the old chesed, what better thing? I love my sister, I love my brother, what better way to do this, to act? But obviously, you take that to the extreme, and therefore that's also chesed. That's why it says Avraham Avinu, because so what happened? That's why you had Yitzchak. Yitzchak, that's why he had gvura. You have to have chesed with balance. Yishmael took chesed to the other extreme, and that's someone you're involved in znus and an illicit relation. That's any midah, as we know throughout the importance of balance. As we know, in fact, that's why. Rabbi Selevan always likes quoting the Rambam in the Shmona Prakim, that when he talks about what's the golden path, the golden path is the middle road. That the Rambam gives an example. You have a reed that's bent all the way to the left, and you want to get it back to the middle. So what happens if you move it back to the middle? Eventually it's going to start going back to the left. You got to move it all the way to the right. Don't do it too hard or you'll break it, then eventually it will come back. So the Rambam writes, all extremes are bad. Only if a person has a sickness, then you have to go to the extreme once in a while. Like the person will say, you know what, this person has fever, has the flu, whatever so he's taking antibiotic, whatever the medicine is, he has an infection. So this person's taking antibiotic and he feels much better. You know what, I'm feeling great. Imagine how good I'm going to feel if I take antibiotic. It's not the way it works. There's a deficiency in your body, you take antibiotic, so all extremes are bad. If you have a sickness, if you're stingy, you might have to go to the other extreme and work it out. But in normal life, everything in the middle road. And as Rabbi Selevan pointed out, it doesn't mean every single issue you have to be in the middle on. It means overall, you could be passionate about, everyone has their own pet peeves. It's okay to be passionate, but it means overall, in the big picture, you're in the middle road, not to go, extreme on every issue. And in fact, interesting, that's what the Gemara calls, there's a halacha by hadassim. It has to be hadassim mishulashim. The hadassim on the Talmud Minim, and now a lot of times now, see that, speaking of convenience, if you go to Yerushalayim or anybody, you see people spend hours and hours and hours looking for a kosher esrog lulav, and they go with, it's a tremendous chinuch. Today, we get them already come in the plastic. Again, so it's the pro are, at least people now, they're having kosher hadassim. So, but in terms of, so the positives outweigh it, but in terms of the chinuch of, we're losing those persons. So what does the Gemara call one that's not Mishulashim? The Gemara has an expression, a Hadash Shota. A Shota is a fool, like someone who's psychotic, crazy. So the Rav said, you call it Hadash Shota? What kind of expression is that? Because that's what the Rav is saying, because the three have to be on the same level. It has to be, for Hadash to be kosher, it has to be balanced. It has to be all on the same level. A Hadash Shota is you're out of whack. In fact, that's why a Katan, we assume a Katan or Katana, someone 13 or 12, they don't consider to have das. But with a lot of bright 9, 10, 11-year-olds.
Wait, isn't the katan below 3 years old?
No, I'm talking about someone under 13 and 12. That's something else. So the question is, what's pshat? A lot of bright, but even we know, one of the things, especially you see it among little kids, is usually, let's say, they get their iPad, they can forget everything. It's pure happiness. They forgot what happened 2 minutes ago. And similarly, you just spent 10 hours in Disney, but you're bringing them back to the car. They're already crying in the car. They forgot about what happened. Kids, that's what they are. They just localize everything. And therefore, that totally extreme sadness, that's why they don't have balance. And that's why unfortunately, many adults don't have balance. That's why many people need help. Because there's no perspective. They get so caught up on the little, are such narrow-minded, they don't appreciate life, they don't appreciate, whatever the things we're talking about. And that's why for a hadith to be kosher, it has to be balanced. And that's why we find that when the Gemara over there in Sukkah talks about there's a halacha, you don't have to eat everything in the Sukkah. You can eat certain types of, let's say, chips, water, you can eat in your house. So the Gemara gives two examples of two rabbis. One rabbi was strict, he said, no, bring it into the sukkah. Another rabbi said, I'll eat it in the house. So there's another, so what's the lesson here? So it's interesting, these two rabbis, I think it was Rabbi Tzadok and Rabbi Gamliel, they were involved with the Churban Habayis. So one of the rabbis, I think it was Rabbi Tzadok, he fasted like a long time to try to prevent the destruction of the temple. Well, let's say Rabbi Gamliel didn't. So what's the pshat? So the Mefarshim is saying, we see that on one hand, one rabbi was strict when it came to eating in the sukkah, but he wasn't the one who was fasting, and the rabbi was fasting. In other words, even when you take on, as the Gemara tells us in Eruvin, that there's Machokas Beis Hillel Beis Shammai. So, really, it's Eilu Diro Kim. It's not one's right, one's wrong, but we follow Beis Hillel because we're ready. Beis Shammai is stricter when we're ready for them. But it's not that one's wrong and one's right. But we follow Beis Hillel. And the Gemara says, So you have a choice. We don't have a choice. But during the Gemara's time, the students of Hillel followed Hillel, the students of Shammai followed Shammai. So the Gemara has an expression, someone who takes all the stringencies of Shammai is a fool walking in the darkness, and one who takes all the leniency of Hillel is a wicked person. In other words, it's not, you can't take, you have to take the middle road. You find a Rav, you find someone, and you go, either, if you don't have one, you go with the middle, with the more conventional, or if you have a Rav or Rebbe, you ask them your question, then you go with what they want. But as we see, that extremes are bad. It's all about balance, and we see that lesson throughout the Gemaras, etc. And that's why, because kids don't have balance, and unfortunately many adults don't have. And that's why one of the keys to happiness, there are many keys to happiness, but one is perspective and one is gratitude. If you don't have gratitude, then you're always going to be upset, because you're always looking what everyone else has, you're looking what you don't have, and therefore, that's why, and it's always, relatively speaking. So that's what we see from Avram, that the idea of Chesed, the Emes, not only that, but in terms of him, that what transformed him, he does acts of Chesed, and we see the difference between Chesed and Tzedakah is that the Tzedakah is mostly result oriented. That the bottom line is Rome should help, and that both aspects are true. That one is the result oriented, that the bottom line is person you help. On the other hand, equally as important, that the act has to transform you. But like anything in life, there has to be a balance. You can't overly focus on one. There has to be both aspects. You have to have in mind to do it to help the person. At the same time, realize that you're not sacrificing, you're really gaining it. That's why the word karban, in English they call it sacrifice. That's really a misnomer. Karban comes from the word karet, to come closer. Really you're coming closer to God. In other words, really you're gaining from it. That's why a person who really is, a person who really sees it, you see this, you see people like, who are tremendous on kibbud av v'em, on honoring the parent, and they're there all the time, constantly this and that, and visiting them in the nursing homes, wherever they are. But you see, the trick is that they don't feel like they're doing anything extra. They feel like, how can I not do it? In other words, they don't view it as a sacrifice. If you view it as a sacrifice, then it's a problem. I'm not saying you can start off feeling that ultimately you have to, work on yourself and develop it. I'm not saying it comes easy like anything else. As Rabbi Selevan used to say, it's harder to change one bad midah, one bad characteristic trait, than it is to finish Shas. It's not because finishing Shas is easy. It takes a long time, but we don't realize how long it is to change, because it's ingrained. And that's what the Drasha Sarada is. Why did Abraham go back to his hometown to find his wife? They worship, they worship idols there, they worship idols here. What was the gain? And the Drasha Sarada explains, because in Haran, his hometown, they had good midos, even though they worshipped idols, but they were good people. And he's saying, he realized it's much harder. If someone's misguided, they just have to be re-educated. The hashkafa, so you don't know. So you sit down and teach them, explain to them the ways of God, and you can teach them the way. But someone who has bad midos, not that it can't be changed, but it's much harder. It's ingrained in them, and it's much harder to do.